All right, welcome back. Thanks for sticking around and allowing us to invade your basement for
My
another
pleasure.
segment. I'm wondering if you can talk about being a teacher of brass instruments. Um, uh, there's a lot of times trumpet high brass players won't go to low brass players because there seems to be a difference in the amount of pressure, the amount of airflow, these kinds of things. That's what they're focusing on. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh, I have lots of thoughts on that. I have all brass players come to me, trumpet players and trombone, horn, and tuba. Interestingly, I think I teach more horn players
Really?
than any other brass instrument, and probably because I've had so many people who've come to me with that instrument who've had great success, and they keep sending me their students. So, but the approach is exactly the same. It doesn't matter if you play trumpet or tuba. That there's no different techniques. There's no different approach to creating music, creating sound on either instrument. And so you mentioned air pressure and airflow, and I understand the air pressure. There's differences in air pressures and airflow, but we can't detect those differences. We have no way of detecting air pressure and airflow while we play. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people try to create a detection, a useless detection. It doesn't mean anything. But our subconscious brain has absolute awareness of air pressure and airflow to produce the sound. But our conscious awareness is very minimal. An analogy that I like to use is that in this room, there are all kinds of radio signals, telephone signals, all kinds of electronic microwaves that are present in this room right now, but we can't detect them. And it would be useless for us to try without a device. So we have to have a phone in our hands, we have to have a radio, we have to have some sort of device that can detect these signals. When we try to create awareness of airflow and air pressure while we're playing, we're trying to detect something that's not detectable. But what is detectable while we play? The sound that we want to produce. And the sound has to be the motivating factor. So I don't talk about air pressure or airflow. I talk only about the sound. And there's a part of the brain, the subconscious part of the brain, that has complete awareness and control, not only of air pressure and airflow, but all aspects of producing sound on the instrument. And all we have to do is send the message to the subconscious by creating an awareness in the conscious mind. And so the imaginative mind should focus on the sound that we want to produce. Jacobs talked about this very specifically. He said go for the product. The product is never blowing. The product is never fingering. The product is the sound we want to come out of the instrument. That's the motivating factor. So the fact that air pressures and airflows are different on different instruments, the mouthpiece size is different, means absolutely nothing. Recently I had a friend of mine who was a very successful trumpet player for many years, decided he wanted to begin playing the trombone. And he said, well, I'm having great success with the trombone. And he said that, well, it must have something to do with the length of embouchure and the size of the mouthpiece. I said, no, it has nothing to do with either one of those. I said, you have a lot of negative conditioning associated with struggling with the trumpet for many years. I call that baggage. You don't have that baggage with the trombone. And so you have a new start with the trombone. You don't have a history of failure with the trombone. That's why you're finding it easier to play the trombone. If what you're telling me is true, that the small mouthpiece has a negative impact on the trumpet players, I said that would be true if there were no great trumpet players. There are many successful trumpet players in the world, and so that can't possibly be true. So my approach to teaching all brass instruments, and I do teach all brass instruments and woodwind instruments I've had, and for many years actually I taught orchestra too, and I had the same approach with the string players as well, is to focus on the music. And this allows the subconscious brain to take care of whatever is necessary to produce the music. So the sound is always the motivating factor.
So much of what you saw early in Jake's teaching when you first went to him in the '60s. What did you notice, if anything, you know, you had a formalized course of study from 66 to 73, and then you had a couple lessons later, but then you would go to some of the classes at Northwestern. Did you notice any change in his pedagogy over the years?
There was a progressive change because he had so many physical limitations in his own life. He wanted to learn how to overcome his physical limitations. And he had an interest in the study of medicine, and so he studied anatomy and all that sort of thing. I contend that if you did not take lessons on Normal Avenue on the south side, in the home, in the basement of that home, you'd never really studied with Jacobs. The downtown thing or the Northwestern thing was not the same. And there are very few of us around anymore who actually had that opportunity. Did you ever have an opportunity?
Not at Normal, no. No, just the stories.
I've been communicating with Toby Hanks lately, and I used to go up the stairs. He used to send me up the stairs to answer the door, and Toby would be there, Bobo would be there. All these great musicians will be there. And in the early days, he used the distraction of various devices to distract the player from all the physical feedback that was interfering with their brain. They were getting so much negative feedback physically that was being induced by the instrument, and it was impacting their brain, so they couldn't focus on the music anymore. And so he would use these devices to distract them from that. Here, blow up these balloons and these balls and make this thing go up in the air and that sort of thing, to distract them from the physical input to the brain. And one of the things that I found was that the ultimate distraction was the music. That I don't use the physical devices to distract the student. I use the music to distract the students, and that's where ultimately we have to go anyway. That he moved from less of that use of devices and analysis, the physical analysis, more to the psychological aspect of it. And I think he realized that's where he really needed to focus the most. Some of that came from people who had studied with me, and he noticed that that was where I was going. Because they would take lessons with me, and then they would go back and take lessons with him. And I only focused on the psychological aspect. I could care less what you look like. I don't care what the student feels like. I care the most of what they sound like. So there might have been some influence there. I don't know. We never actually discussed it, but I saw that transition in his own work.
Roger, it's well known, well documented. Mr. Jacobs was always talking about Bud Herseth. I'm just wondering, during your time sitting in for Mr. Jacobs, subbing for him, also playing extra and playing just in the CSO and around the CSO, did you ever have a sense of what Mr. Herseth thought of Mr. Jacobs?
Well, there was a tremendous amount of respect. They were both unique and great artists. They were world-class artists. They were performed at a level that we only see once in several generations, and they found themselves on the stage of a great orchestra at the same time. There was nothing but a mutual admiration society going on there. And Jake talked about the fact that he felt that Bud was the greatest brass player he ever heard, and there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that Bud felt the same way. As a matter of fact, at RogerRocco.com, I mentioned the fact that Mr. Herseth passed recently, and I said that Bud and Jake are together again. They were together on that stage for so many years, and hopefully they're together again in the next life. And a mutual admiration society. And they both had a way of leading the orchestra and having a tremendous impact on the orchestra with their musical leadership, and the quality of sound for both of them was totally unique. I've never heard a trumpet sound anywhere like I heard from Mr. Herseth, and I've never heard a tuba sound anywhere. I recently had a discussion with Mike Sanders in St. Louis regarding our experience. We both took lessons on the south side with Jake. And the living room was right above the studio. And when you would come for your lesson, you sat in the living room ahead of the time.
Yeah.
And whenever Jake would pick up the horn, you could feel the sound in your feet. The impact of the tone was so resonant that you could actually feel it, and you knew immediately the difference there. I mentioned to somebody recently that when Bud would play the mouthpiece, I could actually feel the sound. It was so intense. The resonance was so powerful. I could actually feel it in my ears. And yet it wasn't, in terms of decibels, but in terms of the quality of the resonance, you can actually feel it. And I had an opportunity to sit 10 feet away from him, and there's an interesting story that I tell.
I was hoping.
Yes, it's coming. Jake would take much of the Ravinia season off because it was such a long commute from the far south side of Chicago all the way up to Highland Park up there. So it was wonderful for me because I got to play most of the Ravinia. And we would rehearse in the morning, and then the concerts would be in the evening. Well, there was no time to go commute all the way back to the south side of Chicago and then go back. And so Bud would hang around all day, and I would hang around all day. And he would walk out onto the stage about 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock concert. He'd walk out onto the stage into his chair and would start to practice. Well, I would do the same thing. I would walk over to my chair. Now, the chair is only 10 feet away from him. And I would start practicing on the stage with him. Now, he knew that I was just trying to get as much influence from him as possible. And so he never one time did he say to me, "Hey, kid, there's a tree out there. Go take that tube out there and play." And it was like I was auditioning for an orchestra.
Yeah.
That's how much practicing I would be doing. And never once did that disturb him, did that bother him. Never once did he say to me, "Go find your own place." Now, interestingly, word kind of got around that this was going on. And students from Northwestern and people would come early to the concerts, and they would listen to this event that would be going on before the concerts at Ravinia. He had a tremendous influence on me in terms of his leadership, his musical leadership, and his ability to play the trumpet. And I credit his artistry and his work as much as Jake, but they were both basically the same. They were basically the same, but I included what I heard from him as well. And I had opportunities to, I had an opportunity to spend some time with him when the Chicago Symphony used to play in Milwaukee once a month. I actually commuted in the car with him. It was 5 hours in the car with Mr. Herseth talking about brass playing. You could never have, not enough money in the world to allow you to have that opportunity. And everything that he told me and everything that I experienced was reinforcement of what Jake was telling us. He had to overcome physical handicaps as well. And when he did, it brought him to a higher level of awareness of the music. He was forced to come up to a higher level of awareness of the music because he was getting a lot of negative physical feedback from his accident. And so his mind became more powerful.
This was the accident in the early 50s?
Right. And when his career was basically over and he wouldn't allow that, there were times, there's a story that he tells about, they were doing Beethoven 9. And Chicago Symphony used to perform live broadcasts on television at that time, Sunday afternoon. And he'd be warming up in the studio, and the physical pain would be so great he couldn't play. Most mortal people will get on the phone and call in the sub, and he would force himself on the stage anyway. Well, on the stage, he could play. On the stage, the music dominated. When the music was dominant, his mind was in the right state, focus is on the music. He transcended the trumpet, and he learned to make his mind more and more powerful. And that's the secret of Jacob. Jacobs was very weak physically. And the secret was that his mind was more and more
Strong.
powerful to compensate for the physical weakness. And he would say, you know, strength is your enemy, weakness is your friend. And what he meant with that, by that was that it doesn't require a lot of physical strength, but it requires a lot of mental strength. And he was willing to make that commitment. And that was the most important thing that I learned from him.
Oh, that's great.
And that's what I communicate now, is that the mind, the trombone, the tuba, the trumpet, the horn in the mind is the one that's important, and that the one in the hands is of very little importance.
That's great. Thanks. Roger, there's a legendary recording with Schulte and Chicago Symphony that you're a part of, 1972 Grammy Award-winning Symphonie Fantastique. I wonder if there are any stories, any memories related to that.
Well, there are many wonderful memories and lessons that I learned from the experience of having that opportunity. The performances were local in Chicago, and then we took the piece on an East Coast tour, Philadelphia, Washington D.C., Carnegie Hall, and so on. And the experience of working with Schulte was, first of all, he loved young brass players. And at the time I was probably at 72, I was 23 years old. It was an opportunity to work with a great maestro, and he was very encouraging of the sound that Jake and I would produce. As a matter of fact, the more sound that we produced, the happier he was about it. And we never intended to record the piece.
Oh.
But we played a performance at Carnegie Hall that was an experience that few people in their lives ever have an opportunity. At the end of the performance, my heart was pounding in my chest, and the audience was hysterical at what they heard. And they started to take the programs and rip the programs up.
Wow.
And throw them on the stage, the paper on the stage, like confetti.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't stop.
Wow.
They were going crazy, and my heart was pounding in the chest. I remember that I had to take 3 breaths for the last note. It was so loud.
Wow.
That last C, the octave C there.
Yeah.
And Jake leaned over to me, and this is a true comment. He said, "Well, we've always played like this, but before Schulte, no one knew."
Yeah.
So we went on to play in Philadelphia, and we went on to play it in Washington, D.C. And then at one point, Jake said to me, "Don't be surprised that when we get back to Chicago, we're going to record this."
Really?
And sure enough.
Wow.
I got the call. We were scheduled to record it at the University of Illinois, Granite Center. So the recording was scheduled for 2 days. And of course, the tubas don't play the first 3 movements. The low brass don't play. So, but Schulte wanted us down there anyhow in case there was some extra time and let's try this or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So the first day we didn't play, but they had no microphones for the brass at all. And Dale Clevenger and Bud Herseth were quite upset that there was no microphones. So the next day, Jacobs leans over to me. The procedure was to play through both the 4th and 5th movement. He said, don't play it like we do at the concerts, because there's no microphones, no one's going to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So we just played it at a moderate volume level. Orchestra took a break. Schulte went back to listen to the performance. And we came out, and there was a microphone right in front of our music stand, right between us.
Wow.
A microphone. And Schulte said, "Gentlemen, play it like you do at the concerts. Let's hear it." And so we hauled off, and we played it like the concerts. The sound was crackling off the walls. And Schulte was grinning. And he said to the engineers backstage, "It sounds beautiful out here. What does it sound like back there?" And he says, and they said, "But Maestro, we can't hear the bassoons." Well, I never knew there was bassoons there. It was always so low. Schulte almost fell off the podium. He says, "I don't care about the bassoons." So
My dears.
My dears, yeah, my dears. And so we went back and we played it, and it's wonderful. But something I learned recently, a story that was told to me by somebody who was at the recording session. One of the students, who was a university student at the time, was backstage with the engineers. Were making the recording, so he was watching this. When it came time for us to actually record it, he turned the microphone off. So what you hear is no microphone at all.
Wow, it's just acoustic
It
from
was
the other
just picked
microphones.
up from the other instruments. So the impact of that sound. And all I had to do was just open my ears and listen to what was happening, am I right?
Yeah.
And it was as if he was playing, not me.
Wow. That's a great story.
It was wonderful.
That's a grand finale, I think. Roger, we can't thank you
Well, I
enough, Puddles and I,
appreciate
for taking the time to meet with us. And it's my first time to Bourbonnais, and it's a lovely town.
If it wasn't for this great man, none of us would be here today. And I'll spend the rest of my life thanking him for what he gave me and the opportunity to share that with the rest of the world.
Well, we'd like to thank you, Puddles and I. I'd like to thank you for taking the time with some genuine University of Oregon duck food, chocolate nut toffee. We hope that you and yours will enjoy that.
Bravo. Thank you. Thanks again, and my pleasure.
It's great seeing you again.
Okay.
Yeah. Now back to you.